Alright, in this video we'll cover adding athletes and also removing athletes that might be on your roster that are not swimming this summer, that swam last summer. So our first step in this is aging up our athletes and making sure that we have the correct date for this year, which is June 1st, 2016. So in this case, we have our team database open. I'm in my CH 2016. I do setup, preferences, system preferences, and I go make sure this date here and the date here on the system age update are both 6/1/16. This point, once I have that, I can hit this age up button. Now this is going to take, once I hit yes, take every single athlete in the system and age them up to their date as of 2016. If I hit yes, that means that any report I run now is going to include the current age of that athlete. And we can look, just to be sure, let's look at Chris Babineau, who was born in 99. So he was 3 March 99, and this is 2016. So he is now 17 years old, and that's correct. So once we've opened this athletes menu, we can do two things. The first thing we need to do is deactivate our swimmers that are not swimming this summer that are on our current roster. So the easiest way to do that is to first click Show Inactive Swimmers, and that'll expand to show the inactive box. And now we can just go through and we can figure out which swimmers are inactive. Like Matt Babineau is no longer swimming, he's 19. So we can easily deactivate him with the checkbox. You can continue on through the system and do that. Perhaps you had a swimmer that moved away. Perhaps they just decided they had too many camps this summer. All you have to do is click that inactive box, and that means that they won't be eligible for any entries in your meets this summer, and they won't print out on your roster when you print out the roster for paying the $7 per athlete for insurance. So when you're done removing the inactive swimmers, it's usually a good idea to uncheck that box so you see just your regular swimmers. So the next thing you may need to do is add swimmers that have just joined. Usually it's younger swimmers, sometimes it's older swimmers that have moved into the area. So the minimum data we need here is we need to add their last name, first name. We prefer to have a middle initial. We don't need a full middle name. And this preferred name is where if you have this guy John M. Smith and he actually goes by the name Jack, you can type in Jack under preferred name and the system will print certain printouts using that name Jack instead of John. Now the most important thing that you can put in here is going to be his birth date. So if perhaps he was born on May 1st in 2004, this is only taking 2-digit dates. It'll automatically calculate his age as 12. Now, the only other piece of data you actually need on here, other than his gender, which is male and female, is what team is he a member of. So this is a drop down. It should only have your team unless you've imported results from other teams into your database. And at this point, if you hit OK, it'll add him to the roster, and then it'll set you up to go ahead and add a new athlete. The nice thing about doing all your new athletes in a row is that it'll pre-populate the team for all the athletes once you do the first one. So at the very end, when you're done, you just hit cancel, and now all your athletes have been added in to your system. And finally, what you can do is you can run a report to run a roster, and there's a couple different ways. If you're in the athlete screen, you can do print athlete reports and do an athlete roster. We don't need their registration ID, just their birth date. And just in case, we only really need it for your team. We'll sort it by their name. We do not want inactive swimmers, and we want both male and female. So at this point, if we hit create report, you should get a report similar to this. And this will be what you want to print out and have in your binder. Your scorekeeper should probably have a copy of this because that'll help them whenever you enter an athlete at the last minute. If someone showed up at the meet that you hadn't planned on and you add them to an event, then the scorekeeper is going to need to have this information in order to actually enter them into the computer at the scorekeeping table. And the nice thing about this, at the very end, it'll tell you the total number of athletes you have on your team. Now, since this is used whether for all purposes, if you have a developmental swim team that you have swimmers that don't necessarily swim in the meets, but they actually practice during your swim team time, then you need to add them to this roster no matter what, because they're covered under your team's insurance policy through the RSL. And finally, in order to get this printout to the RSL for the purposes, you're going to want to actually do an export. So we'll do this little button at the top left. This is the print button like normal, but this is an export. You want to export it to a PDF file. Sometimes people get another dialog box about no email program available, and you can ignore that and just click through and hit OK. And then finally, it's going to ask us where we want to save this, and find the right directory for the way you organize your data, and give it a memorable name. Like in my case, it might be 2016 roster, and a lot of times I'll put the date because you're going to have to print out 2 or 3 rosters during the course of the year or course of the summer as you add more athletes. All right, and at that point, you have a PDF file that you can just email to your RSL rep for your team, and they will hand that in, and then all these athletes are now covered under the RSL insurance.